a lot of people that we're concerned with, people with multiple disability, profound disability, they're not going to say, my daughter never said, I want to do this, or this is the role that I want. We actually were responsible for making her life through knowing her well and picking up on what it was that she was good at or had an interest in. So actually it was up to us to be mindful about her image in the community and developing her competence more than her making choices that were inappropriate. A lot of the planning and stuff came up to us. So that leads on to, I'm just going to show you some of, oh, that's right. So roles are communicated in the, all the time. We make these snap judgments in an instant around what role someone is in, because where they are doing the role, what they're doing, when the role's been conducted, how the person looks, the language that's used around them, either signage or the logo on a shirt, how people look, and who they're with. So all of these elements come together so that you understand, oh, within a second, oh, that's Ryan, he's a committee member because he's turning up at the right time at the clubhouse, he's got the committee colours on, he's in the company of other people on the committee. So all of that fits. Now we need to be mindful of this when we're adding support, because if the support, if someone to do a role needs support, if the person providing the support isn't a good fit, then the role changes. So if Ryan, for instance, just to use that example, is on the committee, generally it's other blokes, generally they're a similar age, or within 20 years of each other, and so if, for instance, me, if I was employed, or an 18-year-old girl was employed to be Ryan's support person in that committee setting, it's most likely that the other people on the committee would not see him as a committee member, but probably see him as a client, as a human service. Does that make sense to people? Okay, so, and if you're seen in the role of client, because many people are seen, I think this is where we get support wrong a lot. If people are seen as a client, the community don't step forward. They just don't. They think, oh, that person's sorted. They've got a worker. There's no role for me to know that person. Whereas if the person is supported and the support looks right for the role, other people recognise that as the person who's in a role, not in the role of client, but in the role of committee member or fisherman or, I don't know, yoga person. You can tell I don't do exercise stuff. Quilter, woodworker. And so then other woodworkers, other quilters, other fishermen will step forward and have a conversation because it's all right. It all looks right. It's what the community recognise as appropriate in the role rather than in the client role. And we'll talk very much on the last occasion about finding the right people to provide the support. Now I'm just going to talk to you for a little while. I think it's the next slide. Yeah, so I'm going to talk to you about my daughter Jocelyn. So this is where she works. We live on the south coast, as I mentioned. So this is the Huskerson Cafe and Bakery. She started work experience there when she was in high school for her hospitality hours. She did 50 hours. At the end of that 50 hours, the boss said it was a pity it was over because she was doing so well. So she started work experience 1 day a week. At the end of year 12, I approached the boss and said, would there be a paid role for her? And the boss said, yes, she'd be delighted. So she's worked there 2 days a week since then. And she's not a front of house girl, Jocelyn. She really doesn't like the busyness of the front of the shop and handling money and customers and orders and things like that. She's the behind the scenes girl. So she works with the baker. She does all the preparation for the pasties and cakes and pies and things like that. And she does more stuff out in the shop now. It's taken time, but clearing up the plates and things like that, and refilling the sugars and those things. Now, when she started that role, when we talk about getting the role right, when she went for her hospitality placement, the school, even though Jocelyn was in regular class, the school sent home a letter saying thank you for agreeing to have this student on an integration program. Now, I immediately put that letter in the bin, in the recycling, and rang the school and said, can we have the work experience letter, please? Because I knew that if the boss got the integration letter, then the role would be wrong. She was expecting someone coming on work experience. The ordinary community don't talk about integration. They don't understand that concept. It's a disability concept. And so then if the boss had got that letter, she probably would have thought, this is some weird sort of social experiment. What do I do with this girl? What do I get her to do? Whereas the work experience letter sets out very clearly to the boss and to Jocelyn, this is work, you're going to be doing work things, this is serious and real. So getting that right when we're introducing people about what the role is from the start is really important. So Jocelyn's also a car owner. Now, I stole this idea from another parent years ago. I was at a presentation. And she said, my daughter won't drive, but when it's her turn to drive, her friends will drive her car. And I thought, wow, that's such a great idea. So we saved her money, her disability support pension from the time she was 16, and that's what purchased her car. And the other thing about it is we live in an area there's not a lot of public transport, so having that car has been absolutely fantastic because we just need to find someone to drive it for her. And the other thing is it's a real enhancement of her image as a young woman in her own eyes about growing up and being responsible and being an adult, but also in the eyes of the community because they know that's Joss in her car. And as well, it's confidence because she's had no interest in helping us clean cars when they were our cars, but now it's her car. She actually participates in looking after it and cleaning it and, you know, doing the insurance and all of those sorts of things. Now, behind here, you can see this is a leisure centre, and this is where Jocelyn has another big role in her life. She actually volunteers at the local creche there every Wednesday morning. And the way this came about was that she was doing child studies at high school. So when she left school, we thought, what can we do? What role can Jocelyn do in the community that keeps her connected to children in, you know, thinking about a vocational pathway in her lifetime? So we looked at all of the places in the community that children were, and we live in a fairly small community, but we came up with about 12 different places. That was, you know, where children were. So preschools, childcare centres, family daycare, before and after school care, playgroups, all of these things. And so when we looked at that, then we decided, well, which one of these would be most appropriate for Joss? And we chose the local pool that had a creche from 9 till 12, Monday to Friday, because everyone that participates is a volunteer. There's not a lot of rules and regulations, so as long as the kids are, you know, alive and, you know, not too battered and bruised at the end of the 2 hours, everyone's happy. And also, it's where younger women are, because we live in a retirement community, so we're trying to keep her connected to women closer to her own age. So she's been here now this is her 3rd year volunteering, and she's known as the baby whisperer because she puts all the cranky babies off to sleep, and she's really well known in the community from that because of, you know, when we go to the local shops and things, people know her really well. She's also a reading student. She left school unable to read at Year 12, but she was motivated to read. So we use her funding. She has community participation funding that we manage, and we employ a reading tutor. She's a primary school trained teacher, and Joss has a lesson 3 times a week for an hour, and after 2.5 years she's actually started to read. And she actually is now a tenant. And so she was successful in gaining the supported living fund money. And again, she didn't say, I want to leave home. What happened was her older brother had left to go to university. Her younger sister was in the process of organising to leave home to go to attend university. And one morning, Jocelyn had a real, cranky carry-on and was talking about Monica, her sister. Monica this and Monica that, and it's not fair. And I said, what's wrong? And she said, it's my turn. So she knew that it was not right for a younger sister to move out. It was her turn to move out next. And even though we thought she had no idea about living independently, we had to honour what she was saying. And so we applied for the supported living fund money and luckily was successful. And so she has now lived away from home for 2 years. The first year she shared, she was a tenant and a house sharer, so we found people just in the ordinary community that were looking for someone to share with. But that became a little bit difficult because there's not a lot of young people where we live that want to share. And it became clear after 12 months that she really preferred living by herself. So she's moved into a unit now and has lived alone for a whole year, and she's really, really happy with that decision. And she's got some really great neighbours and a very busy life, so she's not lonely in that space. So these are some of Jocelyn's roles. She's a bakery assistant, a creche volunteer. She was a housemate. She's travelled internationally. She's a monikers, which I'll talk about at the end. She's a homemaker, tenant, cyclist, car owner, and a phone user. So we think about Jocelyn's life all the time in, in the roles she has in the community. This is when she travelled overseas on a cruise. So self-directing the funding, the funding pays for Jocelyn's companion on their holidays. We've never had to pay wages, but because people are willing to go with her, accompany her, but the funding pays for their ticket or their cruise or their travel. She's recently just come back from Thailand where she went for a holiday with her sister, accompanied her on that. That's Monica in the foreground. And that was a really challenging experience for Jocelyn. So, having the role of traveller is actually, hard work for people who like routine and don't like things to be different. But it's very healthy competence, increasing people's competence being travelling. Frank's asking about who cooks and cleans. Well, Jocelyn has she has some drop-in support, so 3 times a week she has someone that helps her do that, and we'll be talking about employing staff on the 3rd webinar. But she also is developing much more competency herself in those things, so she doesn't need the level of support she needed when she first left home.
Meg, we have another question really asking, could, and this is the words of the question, could an ordinary parent do this? Yes,
I consider myself an ordinary parent. It's just that I've learned a lot along the way because I've done things, I've started with things like this, just finding out from other families, other parents, what they've done and basically stealing their ideas and helping me be more mindful about what there is, what's available and the sort of life that I want from my daughter, and then going for that. And with self-direction, what it does is instead of going to a service and saying, what do you do, and them saying X, Y, Z, take it or leave it, it's where you have the money and you have the thinking and can create something that you think will have meaning and purpose, and then you go to a service and say, how can you help this happen? So it's a different conversation that you're having.
There's a question there too that, what about in a rural setting and whether or not that's your experience, Meg?
So this comes up a lot. It's funny when I travel because people in the city say, oh, it can only happen in the country, and people in the country say, we don't have anything here. There's, in the city they're so lucky because there's so much available. So I think no matter where you are, we know that there's been a breakdown in community. Many people don't know the people in their street, whether you live in the country or whether you live in the city. So part of what this approach, if you like, is about community building. So it's about going back to being known in your community, knowing other people in your community, having a life that's not, you know, from one end of town to the other, but is more centralised, so you have more independence in getting around. You're well known, so you're safer. And, you know, taking advantage of what's on your doorstep. And I think that that can happen whether you're in the city or whether you're in a country area. I've seen it happen. So in looking at a meaningful week for someone, it's you have to really know, as I said before, the person you're thinking about, what they're interested in or passionate about or what they're needing to master. And in looking at people's passions, often, you know, my husband is doing up an old car. And it's an old Mark II Escort. So those of you who know, you know, people who have passions, you know, if you don't have a disability, it's sort of like you're allowed to have a passion and you can be really passionate about it. But if you have a disability, often it's called an obsession. And then if you're obsessed by something, then people are often subject to a behaviour management program. I haven't seen a lot of people respond well to those sorts of things. And so then some behaviour can usually be the result, and then a lot of people end up on medication regimes. So the whole thing sort of goes, spirals downhill. And one of the things with self-direction is you can look at people's passions differently. Instead of trying to address them or wipe them out or have them treated, you can look at harnessing what it is that the person is passionate about and actually incorporate that more into their life. And you'll see how that works in some of the examples I've got in a minute. So it's looking at those things. So it's looking at people's real passions in a different way. And also about what people need to master. So for instance, when Jocelyn was really interested in reading because of another interest she had, we thought, great, because mastering reading would be such a gift if she could do that. So we incorporated then her learning needs into her passion and join them together. So the other thing is about crafting a week and looking at roles that people have is that there's a whole variety of aspects to our life. So there's things like healthy lifestyle, so, you know, being a Weight Watcher, a dog walker, you know, a gym member, a regular walker. We've got interests and passions like being a painter or a musician or a dancer, employment, pathways such as business owner or a casual. Then, you know, vocational outcomes for people. Then there's all their homemaking roles. Then we have spiritual roles, being a parishioner, you know, being a meditator. Then there's active citizen roles such as volunteering and being a library member, community clubs. And there's relationship roles, and also there are lifelong learner roles, so study roles. And so people's lives can be made up and have things happening in all of these aspects of their life. Okay, now this is the template. It's very easy. I found this on the internet, but I find that this, I'm a visual person and I find something like this really helpful. So it's, you know, putting in then what a meaningful week can look like for somebody. So I've got some examples. And so this is the thing about planning, because regardless of whether you've currently got funding, whether you're looking forward to planning for the future, for the NDIS coming in, for what you're going to do with funding, regardless of what it is, you're going to have a plan. And if you think about your plan first, you're really ahead of the game in then getting the support you need to make that happen, to make it real in someone's life. So I've got some examples here. We're going to go to, oh, now, okay, if I just go back. One of the things that first came out, many of you, I'm sure, have been subject to person-centered planning. Would that be right? You've heard of it? Been part of it? Okay. Lots of people were really excited when they first heard about person-centred planning. They thought, great, you know, excited when they first heard about person-centred planning. They thought, great, you know, at last we get a chance to have a real life, to get a person-centred life, a life that's about me. And often they ended up disappointed because what they ended up with was a person-centred program. So a service might give people more choice in what they wanted to do out of what they offered. Or if a few people were keen on something new, then that activity would be offered to what, you know, within the program. And one of the things that you can see about this is that it's 9 till 3. And we know that that's school hours. It's not an adult life. And so many adults, you know, it's evenings and weekends that make up you know, the things in their life that they really enjoy, not just through the daytime hours. Now, a lot of this fell out. I mean, it's not about the services fault per se, because this fell out of what had to happen. People left school, there was nothing, services were set up then, parents were used to things being 9 till 3 so they could work and, you know, live their lives, and so service sort of grew out of that. But what we have now is the opportunity to move out of this type of set program and help people actually get a real life of their own. Okay. So this is an example of one person's week. And you'll see straight away that there's stuff going on in the evenings as well as weekends. But one of the things that I'll just point out to you, you can see that there's the hairdresser features 3 times a week, on a Monday, a Wednesday and a Friday. And so what's happening there is that this young woman, she's left home, and one of the main concerns that her family had for her is that she's got beautiful long hair, but she finds it really hard to wash herself. So that was a major issue for her moving out of home. How's she going to wash her hair? So, but what they did was she moved to, they helped her find a local hairdresser not far from home so she could walk, and they built up her relationship with the hairdresser. So she walks down 3 times a week now, and all they do is shampoo her hair for her. So that got over that whole hump that was really preventing her, one of the issues for her to leave home, and it was just done in an ordinary way in the community. Now the other thing that happens for this young woman is that her passion is art. So she art features across her whole week. So you can see she does an art class, so a study role on the Monday. She attends she audits university, I'll talk about that, on a Tuesday and a Thursday doing art history. She attends an art co-op, so it's like a big space where all artists come together and work on their own projects, but it's about being immersed in the art community. She does that on a Friday, and then on Saturday she has a stall at the market selling her artwork. So you can see art features right through her, her week, and that's because it has meaning to her and purpose in her life. But she does different things to do with her interest in art. Now, university is, it's really interesting because as our TAFE seems to be, you know, really becoming a struggle for people, universities are becoming more open. So Sydney University, I know Wollongong University and some other universities are now, you know, opening up classes for students with intellectual disability to attend the things that are of interest to them and have meaning in their life. So they're not expected to get a degree, they just sit in on the classes that make sense to them in their interests. So that's something, if you live somewhere where there is a university, you might like to pursue for your family member. And you can certainly get more information if you talk to the women at Resourcing Families if you're interested in that idea. And you can see some other stuff, like in her week she's doing home duties and going to appointments and, you know, running her life. and she spends Sunday evenings with her family and attending church. Now I've got another example of a meaningful week here, and this is a young man who, it just takes a little while, there we go. And you can see here, like straight away, you can see newspapers are a huge, you know, take up a huge amount of time in his week. And that's because he has a very, you know, strong passion for newspapers and newsprint. And in his life, he, once upon a time, used to collect all of the free papers that were delivered or the junk mail out of people's letterbox in his street because he was so passionate about newsprint. So his family, when they got hold of the funding and could start managing his money on his behalf, instead of seeing that as an obsession that needed to change, they said, well, that's his passion. How can we incorporate his passion for newsprint and papers in a meaningful week for him? So every morning, he's a very energetic fellow as well. He's in his 30s. So every morning he walks quite a long way to the local newsagent and buys the papers for the day. And then he walks home. He has support to do these things in the community, paid support. And then when he gets home, he has to, you know, he has a bit of a ritual of unrolling them and rolling them up and putting them in envelopes and posting them to some of his friends and things like that. And then through the week too, you can see on Friday he has a paper run. So again, it's, you know, looking after his, you know, walking, so getting the exercise that he needs for his energy, but also, you know, delivering the papers. I have found out since he also has a mail collection enterprise, so he picks up mail from different agencies in the town that he lives in and delivers it to the post office and picks up their post from their post office box and delivers it back. That's a voluntary role, it's not a paid role, but it's very well received in his community and it keeps him in touch with paper and newsprint, which is his passion. It's what makes sense in his life. And then in the afternoon, 7 days a week, he also, at the end of the day, newsagents have to account for all of the newspapers they haven't sold. And so he, after that's done, he actually goes and collects them all and makes sure they get recycled. So you can see that his family have thought really carefully about where in the community is, you know, our newspapers, that our son can have a role in the community that makes sense to him and makes sense to the community. And you can see there are some other things happening there. And so this gives you an idea of Jocelyn's week. So you can see she does, for Frank, I think it was asking about cooking and shopping. So Monday she has shopping support, and that's where she does some cooking for the next 2 days and does her housework and shopping and all her washing and gets herself organised. And then she has reading 3 times a week. She works Tuesdays and Thursdays. Then she does her creche volunteering Wednesdays. She also has an appointment at our local beautician once a month. So when Jocelyn left home, she couldn't tell the time. She knew about time, but, you know, really didn't follow the clock in any way. So what we did was sort her life so she didn't need to tell the time. So she'd ring us when she got up, or we'd ring her to make sure she was up and at it in the morning, and then she gets around town on her push bike. And so after she finishes at the creche, she just goes and has lunch at a local cafe, and then goes to the beauty parlour after that. And so it all just fits. She doesn't actually need to know the time. She just does this thing and then this thing and then this thing, and it flows. What else can I tell you? We also will talk about employment on the third webinar, but on Saturday we've recruited a young woman who assists her with, she writes birthday cards for the people she works with and friends and family to keep her connected, to show reciprocity in relationship building with her family and friends. And so she helps her write her cards and address them and post them, and she also helps her with Facebook and keeping in touch with friends that way. And every Sunday evening she goes with her grandmother to a club for dinner. So so you can see there's a mixture. Joss has a mixture of paid and unpaid support in her life. Okay, so you can use this template, you know, in planning for your own family member. If they're already doing some things, you can put them in first, and it really helps you see where the gaps are. So when you're thinking about a role for someone, you get an idea of when that role should be happening. And so, you know, if their evenings and weekends are completely vacant, well, generally that's the recreational roles, interest roles, passion roles, or sport roles, you know, when we did you know, all of the different aspects of life, or family roles that you might like to be working on or helping someone move into. What people who have been through the process in the launch sites is the people that seem to be doing well and the process is going more smoothly, they've actually already thought about what sort of life they want for their family member. They've had a look at that meaningful week and they've got some ideas already. So when they're talking to the planner, it's not just what can we have. It's, you know, this is what we've thought of, these are the ideas, how does that fit in, how can we get that funded, who can we talk to make this a reality. And so it's a very different question than just saying, you know, I haven't, you know, what do you want, I don't know. What can we have sort of questions. So it's really important in this planning stage to start thinking about these things. And, you know, years ago people would have thought, and I mean some of you even today listening might think that Jocelyn's life and the other examples is, I've had someone say, oh, that's just magic, it's like a dream. That could never be possible for my family member. And look, 3 or 4 years ago, before Jocelyn left school, we had no idea what her life was going to look like outside of school. But we knew we wanted her to be active in the community. We knew what her interests were. We knew she had some capacity for work. So we just followed, you know, were brave enough to ask in the community, followed her interests, really looked at the stuff that was of interest to her, not just trying to fit her into things because they were available. We created things around her that made sense to her, and it seems to work better. And also about moving out of home, we had no idea that she would be living independently and doing so well, but the opportunity came up and we just went with it and problem solved and worked it out as we went. If we had waited for her to be ready to leave home, she'd still be here at 40, 50. Never would have happened. But she learned some of the skills. She doesn't have all of them, that's why she has the paid support. But she learned many of the skills once she left home because she needed to and she wanted to. It was her place. The idea of transition to work is to give people some vocational, you know, experiences and a lot of it too is young people need a bit more maturity when they leave school, so another 2 years makes a big difference to them. But I think if you're looking at self-managing your funding, then knowing your family member well and thinking, well, what do they like? What are they good at? What are they passionate about? Well, what sort of vocational opportunities are there in the community that reflect those things? And then, you know, it's a matter of, you know, finding the business, ringing the business, talking to the business to get some work experience happening for that person. And then if you need some support, it's linking the support to match the role. Not to be, I think it's much more effective when the support helps the person in the role, and remember from earlier, all the matches right, rather than having a generic disability support worker, because that sort of changes the role from a work experience role to that of a disability service or a client role. And it's confusing not just for the shop owner, but also for the person themselves, because they don't know. People respond when they know what the role is themselves. So for instance, when Joss left home, she knew it was her house, so she had to step up to do some of the things herself, even though she doesn't do all of them, if she wanted, because it was her place and her space, where she'd never do those things at home because it was my job to do those things because I'm her mother. So I think if people are clear themselves about the role, they actually, it's surprising, even people with, you know, profound disability, how much they change with, you know, profound disability, how much they change when they're embedded in a role that makes sense to them, and all of the indicators are that this is the role that you're in. And if it's a work role, which is transition to work, you really need to be clear about getting that right. If we lived in Sydney, I can tell you we'd only be looking at employing people in the next suburb, in that suburb or the suburbs surrounding. So that then the ease of supporting someone is there. You get a longer term generally commitment because it's an easy sort of travel and trip, and also the likelihood of people running into each other in the local community is greater as well, and also your person meeting the people they know in the community is greater as well, because everyone's in the community. So that's one of the strategies that we think of, because the more people that know her, and they're not friends, it's not a magic thing. The majority of people that know Jocelyn are just very well-meaning acquaintances. But I'm happy with that, because that's basically who I know in my life. I've only got very few very close friends. The rest of the people are people I know. And so if she has a lot of those people in her life, generally, she's safer, and we're working towards her life, going on when we've fallen off the perch. The other thing is too that her brother and sister, like she has a brother and sister, and they don't live here, but they're interested in her life. And so some of the things that are happening now, like Jocelyn rings us the day she has to be up and at it to go to work and to go to creche, she rings us to let us know that she's up. Well, she can easily ring her sister in Sydney or a brother in Melbourne just as easily as she can ring us. So we've already thought about those things, and we'll probably be transitioning for her to do those things in the next few years, so that it's already set up. We're practicing before we, cark it. Sure. Well, I've known some people, actually I think for people with really high physical support needs or multiple disability, people who use wheelchairs, need assistance to communicate, need assistance with everything in their life, this holds great opportunities, because often those people live a really boring life. It's at home, it's at the day program, they're often not surrounded by a lot of people who speak, and it's very routine, and often it goes on for years. That's the other thing is too. So the people that I know who are in that circumstance that have taken, harnessed the money, the first thing is the ebb and flow of the Meaningful Week suits the person.